shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here for a chat.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Hello and welcome to episode 326 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is a Friday, January 14th in the evening. From Gadsden, New York, it's me, Ridiculous Hat. From Karazhan, California, we got Bot.
Yo.
From Nomergon, Ohio, we have Edelweiss.
Hello.
Hello. And from where you are a listener, we have you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening or watching if you're here in the Twitch chat. Hi, Twitch chat. Thank you so much to our patrons, especially our newest patron, Justin M. Thank you so much for your support of the show. And thank you everyone that's left us a review over on the Apple Podcast Store. It really helps other people find the show. Life and Ladder. Okay. So just gonna get this out of the way ahead of time. I think the tone of our show today is gonna be a bit more on the somber side. Because the standard meta right now, I think is, it's got some pretty clear flaws. That's how I'm gonna put it. If you're enjoying it, please keep playing, find the fun. But it's got some pretty clear flaws. They've announced that there will be balance changes in about a week and a half. We'll talk about that. And I know at least myself and Edel are having trouble finding the fun right now. I'm sure we'll, yeah, I think we'll figure that out too. But just be aware, tone's going to be a little bit more somber this week. Just throwing that out there. But we're going to try and make sure that we recognize all perspectives and go through the news and make the show that you all like to listen to. So, Edelweiss, you get to start us off after that segue. How's Life and Ladder?
So, I've decided this is probably a good time for me to finish playing Horizon Zero Dawn. I did, however, encounter a situation that I did not think possible, which was I got so motion sick. But normally I'm sort of fine with the game, but there's certain areas, certain actions, a lot of jumping or any of the dark areas where I get really motion sick. And I actually threw up earlier in the week because I got so motion sick.
That seems unusual.
I assumed I had something in addition. I took a fast COVID test. It was not, it was not positive. So yeah, it was just motion sickness. So that was rough. Been a little more careful recently, trying to do small doses, chew ginger, whatever, anything that can help. But that was definitely a first for me, actually throwing up because of playing a game. But it's still more fun than playing against Weapon Rogue. So there is one sort of weird, perhaps it's defensive mechanism that I end up with sometimes, which is it can be nice if something is truly like so popular that it's everywhere. I do get a little bit of a like challenge accepted sort of mentality of I like trying to build to just beat that deck by any means necessary. So that has sort of been my focus in Hearthstone, is like, how can I beat Weapon Rogue? Because I really don't want to lose to that deck. And I don't feel that bad losing to other decks, just as long as I don't lose to that one. And we've been experimenting with various tech cards like Gangster, which is the 2-mana 4/2 stealth that attacks a minion when your opponent, whenever your opponent plays a minion, it attacks that minion. And that, like, you have to be careful. You have to make sure they've played both Gnolls and Maestra, and ideally you sort of play Mutinous and the Gangster, because then you eat the Viper that's in their hand, and you can Gangster the spell damage minion, or you just eat the spell damage minion. All of this, of course, in Control Warrior, gaining as much armor as possible. It's been a time. One advantage, though, is you can usually beat the face hunters that are also trying to beat the weapon rogues, but in a different way.
Yeah, very different way. I admire your approach of how do I solve this puzzle. Though it's the gameplay experience of beating Poison Rogue isn't always better than the gameplay experience of losing to it. It's still just super duper tense. It's just more relieving, is how I feel at the end of those games. Except for Poison Rogue Mirrors, which are very silly. They are very silly games.
Yeah, I think I so don't want to play mirrors that I basically have written off the class for now. And I at least find it satisfying when I sort of go, okay, hang on. We're going to wait a turn to play the Viper. They just got the Swine Tusk Shank. Let's let them juice it up a little bit. We'll wait a turn. And they put, double Silverleaf Poison and some other thing. And I'm like, all right, cool. Now we do it. And then they concede. That's always deeply satisfying. I don't know.
Yeah. There's satisfaction in certain interactions. Just overall, the play pattern, I think, is something that I'm looking forward to moving on from. Bodikus, how you been doing, buddy?
So this is what it took, huh?
Poison
Both
Rogue.
of you finally hate Standard, and I'm starting to enjoy it more. This is
Oh,
what
good,
happened.
good. I'm glad you found the fun.
Literally, I feel like a week ago, if definitely 2 weeks ago, you both were talking about how good the Standard was.
Correct.
And how everything was going super well, and now both of you are down in the dumps, and I'm like, oh, I kind of found a deck finally.
Good.
Now my deck
Listen.
doesn't necessarily beat Weapon Rogue, but thankfully I'm around like Diamond 5-ish area where people will just play wild stuff. We won't go what they wildin' in Diamond 5, let me tell you. They play some crazy stuff there. But yeah, I've been playing Beast Druid.
It's a fun deck. Oh man, that deck is super fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which build are you
got
running?
a lot of just like very interesting kind of combinations that it can put through. And also a lot of not non-bows. There's like a bunch of cool things like Oracle of Elune plus Ivus the Forest Lord can do some fun late game shenanigans.
All right, so I've got a suggestion. Instead of using the term not non-bow, how about the term synergy? Or perhaps even combination, which we could shorten to a word that sounds like non-bow.
Well, no, the non-bow is Moonlit Guidance and Kazakus.
Correct. Yes. Okay. That is
not a combo.
It's great if you want a 4-mana 3/3, but it's not great if you want a card that does things.
You mean a 6-mana 3/3?
Well, you get the I guess you get the 4-mana 3/3. Yes, it's a lot of mana
You
for
get
a 3/3.
you get it, and then you get the good 4-mana 3/3 afterwards.
Yeah. So you're playing the No Hands Gamer / PT John build with it's got Ghidra still, Guff, Ivus, Kazakus.
I'm playing this was the first Beast Druid on HS Replay deck. And yeah, so it basically the goal is just to discount your Frost Saber Matriarchs and your Umbral Owls down to a low amount of mana, and then play them with Oracle of Elune, and then kill your opponent with Arbor Ups. But there's a bunch of just really good value in the deck with like Nature Studies and Moonlit Guidance. Moonlit Guidance has felt kind of incredible with the amount of value you can get from it if you play it at the correct time. And then, as I said, just the idea of going Oracle of Elune plus Ivus Ivus the Forest Lord still technically costs 1 when you play it, and then it gets all its buffs, and then it gets copied by Oracle of Elune. So you can win some games by just making 2 giant Ivuses with Divine Shield and Rush, and then kill your opponent next turn. But yeah, it's been a fun deck. I mean, I'm not gonna say that like all of a sudden my my lust to play Hearthstone is all of a sudden back. I'm just saying that finally it's like a deck that that I somewhat enjoy playing.
It speaks to
And
you,
so-
right? Like, it's a deck that speaks to
Yeah.
you. Yeah, that's cool. It's
It's got a lot of depth to it for an aggro deck. It feels a lot like the old token druid decks felt, where some games you just kind of play minions and kill your opponent, and other times you have to think through like saving resources and how to use everything correctly and when to go in, and yeah, it's just got a lot of play to it, and I really like aggro decks that have a lot of play to them, which is why I feel like I generally shy away from decks like Face Hunter, where it feels like you play out a lot of times. Obviously, there's decisions to be made, but it feels like with Face Hunter, a lot of times you just play out your cards and hope they're good enough. Whereas this deck, it feels like there's a lot more planning of, do I need to run out my Oracle of Elune on turn 3 because I need to run it out? And most of the time the answer is yes. And hope that it doesn't get killed. Or do I really need to save it because I'm playing against a deck that's going to need to have a big turn with Frostsaber Matriarchs and Umbral Owls, and you just kind of do a gigantic board swing that they can't deal with?
Yeah, it's a synergy-heavy mid-range deck that can also kill you on 5 with Arbor up, so it's really nice to know that you can play a deck that aims to do things on turn 5, 6, 7, 8 consistently, but also that if you have to pressure, you're capable of doing so. But this is not like the Razormane Battleguard deck from last meta, where your goal was to kill on 5. It's something that happens because Arbor Up is an insane card, but that's not the main thing you're trying to do. The main thing you're trying to do is make big swing turns. Deck is very good against scabs. If they scabs back your Matriarchs, like, all right, I'll take 2 of those. I'll take a couple. It's less good against, scabs into burn.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty good into scabs because you get to replay all your stuff really quickly. It's not as good when they just kill you after you play all your stuff again, because they usually do. And also, I want to say the other thing to watch out for if you're learning this deck, just quick tutorial: Frostwolf Kennels, very, very good card in the deck. It makes stealth wolves. Those wolves are stealth. You do not have to attack with them. Make sure that you use that to your advantage, because, as Hat said, this is a deck that can kill on turn 5. It doesn't have to kill on turn 5. And a lot of times you're going to need to save those stealth wolves, even if you take a bit of chip damage in return, just so you get bigger compostings, bigger arbor ups, bigger whatever, just to be able to swing. It really does really good at swinging the board back into your favor. So, yeah, keep stealth, minion stealth sometimes.
Yeah. I really enjoy the play pattern of Moonlit Guidance. Like, not only is it a powerful card, it's interesting,
so powerful, yeah.
But it's really interesting too. Like, it's not always just grab a 0-mana beast and then grab a second one, though it's often grab a 0-mana beast and grab a second one. That comes whenever you have that option. That's usually what you're doing. But I've been playing a build that doesn't run the legendaries. It goes it curves a little differently. It's got Trogs in there. Park Panthers to deal with double agents a little bit more effectively. There was one day where I was tilted and I had 2 Rustroth Vipers in there. They're not in there anymore, but they were in the deck for a moment. But it's a beast on curve. Listen, turn 3, I want to play a beast. Rustroth Viper's a beast sometimes comes up. It was a bad idea. I tried it out. But I play Vibrant Squirrel and Guidance for Acorn. You draw the Acorn. You play the copy, you get the 2-1, you draw the originals to cast when drawn, so then you make another 2-1, then you draw. So there was one game where I did that, and I hit 3 acorns. And it was, make 4 2-1s and draw a couple cards for 3 mana. Felt pretty powerful. You're not always going to hit that, but I think Vibrant Squirrel is core because of that, which means I'm not running Living Seed. I also am not a huge fan of Capture Coldtooth Mine. It just feels like a really slow way to get your good cards. And whether or not I want the deck to rely on composting, the deck relies on composting. So running Other Draw just to hedge around not drawing composting usually feels like I'm just compromising. Trying Cult Neophyte right now.
What was that other card you were talking about? Capture what?
Capture Coldtooth Mine, the 2-mana, draw your highest or lowest cost.
Yeah, my deck doesn't play that card.
Yeah, it's 2 mana, draw a 7-mana beast, which then becomes 0.
The decks I like play that card.
But I'm guessing those are bigger druids. Those are larger druids.
They are. So I historically have been a druid hater. I think Spreading Plague kind of made me very unhappy with Druid's presence in Hearthstone. And Force Roar. Force Roar was like, I hated Force Roar. But playing with over 10 mana is kind of addicting. I do also get pretty upset when people do that to me, but I can acknowledge that it's a very fun thing to do. And it's pretty cool to be able to Cold Tooth Mine in, say, the Quest Druids to always draw the hero, because it's just the highest cost card in the class, or in the deck. And so you just guarantee get the hero most games. That's pretty cool. And then on the like corrupt side of things, that Yashiraj deck, it sure doesn't feel good to have happen to me when I'm playing Control Warrior targeting the Face Hunters and the Rogues. But it's kind of interesting and fun to see a deck that's win conditioned is to play Yashiraj like 3 times in a game and just play the Amulet over and over again.
Well, that deck wins a lot of different ways. I admit, a portion of my salt around this standard metagame comes from I was trying an anti-rogue handlock. I played against a couple of Ramp Druids. They both landed Yogg, eat entire boards, and I had no answer to 35 Yogs, or 37, 35, whatever. They were big Yogs. And I did get Rod of Roasted to death one game. That was also, a little sketchy. But, I mean, the big Druid decks, I enjoy what Druid gets to do.
Didn't they remove Rod in Standard?
No. You think of Rune Mithril Rod, not Rod of Roasting? Rod of Roasting is the
no, Rod of Roasting, the deal 10 back and forth.
No, that's definitely in Standard. That definitely happened.
Oh.
But 5% of the time, Yogg plays that.
Yeah.
Huh. I
Believe me, it's in Standard.
Off the wheel. Yeah, I mean, obviously it happened to you, but I could have sworn I looked at the wheel and like it usually has the small sliver and I didn't see it, but I must not have been paying attention.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hasn't come up for me recently, and I'm definitely not super thrilled about Yogg being highly prevalent in that deck, but
well, it's the pouch for the second and third Yogg. They're a little sketchy to me, but it's. I would love for that to end up being the biggest problem with the format going forward. That would be a great place to end up. Like, fantastic. Yeah. And I love that we're playing Abominable Lieutenant in that deck and Capture Cold Tooth Mine in that deck. It's just go draw Lightning Bloom. Like, I like Lightning Blooms. I'm gonna miss it. It's not gonna be long for this world. But yeah,
You're gonna miss that card.
Yes.
I'm not gonna miss old school Innervate. Ugh.
There are consequences to overloading, and I like Quest Shaman. I don't know. It's a cool card. So it's... I'm gonna wait for that motorcycle. So I've also been trying some Beast Druid, and I do like the synergy and the crazy swing turns you can make, and just it has so much sustainability. Board clears don't really slow you down unless they're also paired with counter pressure, like a lot of counter pressure. No, you don't want to get soul rended, but you play around these sort of things, and you're capable of making big boards over and over and over again, and it's really nice to constantly have more gas in the tank. It's a fun play pattern. I do think, Oracle with Matriarchs can come down really, really fast. I got Oracle into Matriarch on I think it was Oracle, Druid of the Reef for Rush, and 2 Matriarchs on turn 4 against a Quest Shaman. And if that's inconsistent, I think it's, pushing the boundaries of power. If that is reliable, I think it is something that maybe they can look at in the future, because it's very efficient minion development. But for now, I'm really enjoying what Druid is doing in various different ways. But as for me, I have dramatically pulled back my standard engagement. I'm still... I fell out of top 100. I'm around 130-ish right now or whatever. I've tried a bunch of stuff. I'll put my stats up on the screen. In the past 7 days, I've played just under 100 games. I believe it is 93. 54 of those were against Rogue. It is just about 60%. Looks like Pac-Man on the screen there. So that's... I'm going to say it. That's too much Rogue. I'm just going to say it. Too much. I like Rogue. I like Rogue. Listeners of the podcast, this is not new information to you. If this is your first episode, welcome to Concede. Thank you so much for downloading. I appreciate it. If you have listened to more than one episode, you are probably aware that Rogue is a class that I enjoy deeply. I very much like it. And what it's doing right now is too good, and there's too much of it. So, I want it to get worse. and it is going to. But in 11 days, and until then, I'm probably going to tone down my engagement with Standard a good bit. I already have, because the advice that I've given many, many times to others, and the advice that I want to take myself, is when you're not finding the fun, reevaluate your relationship with the game for a moment. Take a step back, take a minute, find something else to do, get some variety in your gaming diet, come back when you're ready. And so I'm going to clear my quests. I have been playing a little bit of Classic, and it is very refreshing that my opponent's hero class stays the same the entire game. Druid also quite good in that format. Might try Wild, but I don't think that if I'm having trouble with mana cheating and killing from hand, that Wild is the way to fix that problem, so I'm probably going to chill on that a little bit. We'll see. And I'm just going to follow my own advice and take a break right now while I'm not enjoying it. We know that changes are coming soon. I look forward to them. I have faith in the team doing them. And Alterac has gone from one of my favorite metas ever, especially right in the first week of 22.0.2 when Vicious Syndicate had 43 decks for me to embed on the website, to now this update this past week I think was 3 decks. Looking forward to when they make some nudges so that I can get back to having a good time. And if you're having a good time again, feel free to keep playing. Don't, tune out the negativity. You enjoy what you enjoy. And if you're not having a good time, let's hang out and do some other stuff for a little while, and we'll be back.
I would be willing to bet money that if your legend rank was not as high, you would be having more fun.
I would not take that bet because 100% for sure. And yeah, there's a lot of Poison Rogue and people that want to qualify this month. And I mean, yesterday it switched back to Thief Rogues because there was this cycle. There's this cycle of, all right, I'm going to play Poison Rogue with Gnolls. All right, I want to beat that deck. I'm going to play a lot of Vipers and a lot of Druids, or Druid with Vipers. Because the no-hands Belly Druid, which gains a crazy amount of armor, is really, really hard to beat. It's really hard for Poison Rogue to beat. So, a lot of that. So people go back to the normal Thief Rogue, which is capable of making more minions and has more pressure and gets out of the gate a little bit faster. And then because Poison Rogue goes down, more people switch back to playing Mozaki Mage, which is also not a play pattern that I'm a huge fan of. I'm being very diplomatic here. And then because all the Mozaki Mages start to pop up again, people get flowed on 3, and then they queued up, and they bring back Poison Rogue. And that's the whirlwind of high legend right now, and I want to get off that ride. So I've been playing Titanfall 2. The single-player campaign is fantastic. Been really enjoying it. Strongly recommended for people that like FPSs with good campaigns. I've been playing a little Classic, and, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing right now.
You'll have, 5 days after the patch to kind of go in if you really want to stay there. I kind of went on a death spiral of my rank because I was top 500 for a very long time, and then it just stopped working for me because I can only go so long try-harding. And I did a thing that I really should not do, which is I played on my phone in bed, and I tanked to 2K super hard that night. And now I'm in this weird state where I feel a little better because it's not everything I'm seeing, except I've retained the hatred from when I was seeing all the rogue. So I was still trying to hard counter it, except I face other things too now. It's kind of a mess. So I need to recalibrate.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing okay. I'm under 50% this month, but I'm still on top 200. I'm not pushing for an invite or anything like that. I'm okay if my rank depreciates a little bit. I'm still gonna be. This is the 3rd or 4th time since Stormwind came out where I've had double-digit legend numbers in a month, and it's getting to the point where it feels more natural to be there, or at least it doesn't feel like that I'm a fraud that doesn't belong in that bracket. So I've been happy that I've had the opportunity to step up my game, and it really feels like that I can see and experience the improvements in my own play. But I'm not there for the sake of being there, and I don't need to play to justify keeping the number where it is. So I'm gonna pull back to make sure that I'm not a slave to a rank. because I don't want to feel like I am being held captive by a rank. It's okay if that number changes, but if I'm not having a good time, I'm not gonna force it. So yeah, that's where we're at. Shall we jump into the news? Because we've got some stuff to talk about.
Let's do it.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right. So, in other news outside of Standard, I believe this is the first Battlegrounds reveal season we're going to have. So, there's going to be a major update for Hearthstone. We know Point 2 is coming out, and this is where they have traditionally said they're going to be doing a big Battlegrounds update. And instead of just kind of giving us a big dump with all of the new information, they're going to roll it out over a couple days. And they're going to be giving away a bunch of reveals to various content creators. So starting January 18th, which is in about 4 days from the time of recording, they're going to start some reveals, giving a bunch of reveals out, and they're going to be unveiling an all-new mechanic and tons of new content that will change the game for every single hero, as quoted by them in a little post here. So yeah, this is pretty neat. There's going to be kind of an event as well, where the top 8 Battlegrounds players are going to get a buddy to co-pilot and go head-to-head for a special fun preview of the new patch. This is going to be from 10 to 2 Pacific on the 20th. So the following channels are going to be live to have information about this. So we have Slissa, Crip, RDU, Sunbacon Relaxer, aka 12 Wins, Dog, CC, Sunglitters, and Shady Bunny. Yeah, so this should be a fun event. I'm excited to see what they have in store for the next little bit of Battlegrounds. And then, in addition, on the 20th, there's going to be a very special Duels update revealed by Regis Kilbin on YouTube at 7 a.m. So even before this Battlegrounds kind of preview of gameplay, there's going to be a Duels reveal, which is pretty special as well.
It's pretty exciting. I looked at Firestone, the deck tracker app that's not Hearthstone Deck Tracker. They put out stats last week-ish, or maybe it was the week before. Trying to remember. Indicating that Duels is the 3rd most popular mode in Hearthstone. More than Wild, more than Mercenaries, either PvE or PvP, more than Arena. And that's... I think they've done some pretty good work of keeping it interesting, and more people have gotten into it over time. Part of the help is definitely that Regis is a huge content creator, has been putting out a lot of Duels content, but it's perfect for content creators because you get to do goofy things, but also there's a random variant element, and it's deck building heavy. So I'm not surprised at all that it's worked really well for content, and that you can take slices of runs. You don't have to show every single game, show slices of runs. And the language on the tweet here is that this is a huge Duels update. We've had some data mined info in the past saying that the number of choices available for heroes go to 10. So it's unclear if you'll be able to choose your hero out of all 10 classes this time, but that might be nice. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the 10 mercenaries instead of the Skolo Man's Teachers, because Skolo's about to leave. So I'm really looking forward to what we have here.
Honestly, I think it's just a big credit to the Duels team in making Duels an enjoyable experience where people who are struggling to find a connection with some of the other modes are starting to hear whispers through various content creators about playing Duels and how much fun it actually ends up being, and then they try it out for more than a run or two and then realize that there's actually a lot of depth and a lot of kind of cool fun things you can do there, and how it's different, but it's it's expected to be powerful, whereas you don't have to you're not thinking as much in standard about like, oh wow, this needs to get nerfed, this is too good, this play experience isn't fun. In duels, it's like, what kind of crazy stuff can I do? And then is my opponent, like, my opponent did a crazy thing, but I expected them to, because they're not looking at keeping duels quite as tightly knit balance wise as something like standard, where we're expecting balance updates every couple weeks at this point.
Yeah, I think I didn't give duels enough credit or enough of a chance, because I just had this mindset of like, oh, it's not a premier game mode, whatever. I shouldn't concern myself with that. But when there was that legendary quest of play a couple games of duels, I got really drawn in and stayed for far longer than completing the quest, right? I did a few runs. I'm still only doing it casual. I'm never paying an entry fee. But I think, initially realizing how late this patch was going to be, I thought maybe I'll start streaming some mercenaries. But unless you're doing PvP for mercenaries, the stream is basically just chatting, because it's pretty mindless just farming for tasks on characters and getting coins and stuff. Like, it's almost meant to be done while you're doing something else. Whereas PvP, there's decisions to make, and you can chat about the strategy, the head games, the decisions. I think that's really interesting, but I'm just not at a place where I feel like doing Mercs PvP right now. So I might stream some duels, because it's got all the stuff I like, right? Just interesting deck building ideas. It's pretty, like, yes, there's some things that are known to be strong, but you can kind of do your own thing too and end up having a powerful deck. The treasures make it different every time, so I may just kind of wander over into that side of things and see how it goes.
It's a fun mode. I recommend, to the surprise of many, I recommend the roguelike. It's, good mode. It's fun. Just to have the expectation that things get really goofy, especially later in runs. You have to know that that's gonna happen, because that's gonna happen. And if you expect things to stay at a relatively low power level as you get more wins, that's not how it's gonna go. But yeah, really fun.
It almost has a mix, like, not perfectly, but it almost has a mix of the other modes that happened before mercenaries, because you have like the somewhat deck building of standard when you start, and then you have the card buckets, which is kind of like choosing cards for arena, and then you have the different hero powers, which is loosely battlegrounds, in that it changes kind of the character quite a bit. Not a perfect comparison, but it kind of has like a mix of all those three modes, mixed in with a bit of kind of randomness that makes it feel different than just standard Hearthstone. I think it was kind of slow to get going, but as long as they kind of keep up the momentum, and I think the biggest thing that they should do, if I were to make a recommendation for them, is just, if you're going to add content, that I would refrain or kind of shy away from unlocked content, because I feel like a big reason why it was so slow to get off the ground is because when it launched, it was like this rigid bit of like, here's your choices, you actually don't have any choices, but you'll have choices later you can have choices, but right now this is all you can do. And now that basically all the choices are unlocked, even though for me, like, I pick the same thing every time, but it feels more like there's more options, even if I don't use the other options, I guess.
Yeah. It's
because I think that was like my biggest issue with the release of Diablo, is that like you didn't have all of his treasures and all of his hero powers at the start. and I wanted to have those. I didn't want to have to unlock them by playing him.
I think they've probably learned from this game mode called Mercenaries that maybe unlocks by playing over time aren't what the player base is looking for. And I like the idea of not having paywalls, and they removed all the paywalls from Duels, which I think was great. But unlocking by playing means it takes longer to get to the fun thing, and so just let me find a way to get to the fun thing faster. Maybe the unlocks can be way, way easier to meet, but in this particular case, I do think the unlocks for Diablo were an interesting idea academically, but didn't end up working out all that well.
I'd also really love if it was just, okay, these are the 10 mercs, one for each class, and you can just pick, because I'm particularly in casual, I've gone play first game, retire because I didn't hit the actual class that I wanted to play, and it's sort of like, why not just let me play the class that I want to play?
And that's one of the things that's highly speculated to be in this upcoming patch. So I am hopeful that we have the ability to, the novel idea of play what I want to play. I think that would
I like it for casual, and I think for competitive, I kind of like the 4 hero choices, because if you're trying to grind your rank up in competitive, I think being able to play a variety of different heroes is skill testing.
Yes, I do agree with that as a person that never plays heroic duels ever.
And I only play heroic, so
yes.
While there are definitely times where I queue up and I'm like, this is the class I want to play. Oh, I didn't get it. I kind of end up not playing. I think that overall, if you want it to be like a semi-competitive thing, or a somewhat meaningful climb, forcing people to play different classes and learn about the different ones is beneficial.
Yeah, there was a game design podcast I listened to about Hades. I know, I'm a meme. Where it's the Amir Rao, the game director, said that Hades is a better game if you play different weapons, but if we force you to do it, then you have less fun if it's not what you want to do right now. So instead, there's an incentive system. And you could do that in something like Duels, where one of the 10 is glowing and your rewards are higher or something, right? Like, it's figure out some way to, I guess daily quests kind of do this as well. If you get a class-related quest, you go into Duels, you're more likely to play that. So, and that's what daily quests kind of do right now, is they incentivize you to do different things, but you're not required to. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some mechanism there, but also in casual, getting to play what you want to play seems like the way to go. In Heroic, I am compelled by the argument of the skill of figuring it out is important. And either way, both circumstances still call for pretty active balancing of the mode, so I hope they continue to do that, just to make sure that some classes aren't way, way ahead. Because if you go with all 10 and one class is way, way ahead, it gets played way more. And if you go with 4 only, then that means the people that get the broken class are way, way ahead. And so, of course, active balancing really helps for both. So,
yeah, that was something I always liked about drafting in Magic, is whenever you would get forced into a bad color or whatever, if you got, and then you still had to figure out how you were going to win playing the underpowered, if you talk to it in Hearthstone terms, if you have to play the underpowered class, trying to figure out how to get as many wins as possible, I think is a skill in and of itself. Plus, you end up sometimes finding out that there's very powerful combinations and if you have a really good run, you can still end up getting 12 wins with one of the more underpowered classes. Or sometimes I even found, like with Hunter, I found a deck that I really, really enjoyed playing and ended up getting more 12 wins with Hunter, even though it was a class I never really looked at before.
My
Death Rattle
favorite
Hunter
sets or drafts to do in Magic were when there were double or triple lands, and so I could just draft lands the first few rounds and pick up just Just play 5-color good stuff. It's always my favorite strategy.
Of course it was. Yeah, I am unsurprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Death Rattle Hunter, but it was specifically Death Rattle Hunter with Staking Acclaim, which whenever you discard or whenever you play a Discover card, it gives your board +1/+1, and found out that that was very powerful, and you could, when combined with Death Rattle being very sticky to the board, you were able to get buffs out of it, and it kind of spirals out of control pretty quick.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's all about the reveal season. More info about that and everything next week. We'll talk about it a bit. And then speaking of changes, we're talking a bit about Standard and, maybe some of the co-hosts not having the best time hoping for some changes. Unfortunately, the patch for those changes will not be arriving until January 25th. Which is
11 days from the time of this
almost
recording.
2 weeks away. Yep. We'll get the full patch notes on the 20th. But this is a bit of a ways away. As well, in those patch notes, we'll have the Beg Battlegrounds update, and then some balancing for Wild, some new mercenaries, and the quote-unquote big duels update. So, this timing's a bit away. How are you two feeling about having the current standard that we have for another 11 days?
I think it's hard not to feel a little bit blindsided because a precedent has been set of balance changes very quickly. I think previous times we've even seen them go like, hey, we can't really do a patch, but here's a couple cards that we're changing because balance update. And so having gotten used to that, to suddenly be thrown into, it's not actually this bad, but it feels kind of like Doom in the Tombs, of like, oh, we're stuck with this for like a while, and we've got to still do qualifiers and TCHL and other stuff. It's just like, I guess, and actually for those, it's at least better because you can just ban Rogue.
It's much better.
But you do have to bring it.
Yeah.
And you do have to ban it. It at least is interesting. I feel like this is inevitable, that it's like times like these are interesting for Conquest because you have a ban and they're completely horrendous on ladder. That's just sort of how it goes. But yeah, it's weird to sort of think, oh wow, we're like, people really don't like stuff right now, and the changes are not coming for a while. Coming off the high of it felt so good earlier. I mean, even last week where we knew Rogue was strong, it just like, it hadn't gotten to this point. I think the turning point was Meaty's list of adding the Maestra and Gnolls to the weapon Rogue. Really kind of escalated things.
Yeah, Orange was playing it in qualifiers that weekend, and then Meaty tweeted it, and then everyone realized, hey, you know what would make this deck better? 0 mana 4/5 rushers. And that they were right. That was a correct thing to do. This is going to be a hard section to find nuance in, because there's just so many feelings. I'm going to start by saying I seriously doubt the design team got back in the office in the 3rd or the 4th, looked at Standard and be like, yeah, this can wait. I don't think that's what happens. I think that if you were having a balance meeting about this, even last Wednesday, last Thursday, if you were having a meeting about what you would change, I think it would be about 12 minutes long. It is not difficult to figure out at least just the outliers to hold us over for a little while. My guess would be they are limited by the ability for a patch to get in the game. And the word server side is misunderstood here. When a data-only patch comes through, even if it's just changing numbers on cards, even if it's just Stealer and Flush Giant were the only 2 cards that change with the in-client messaging, there's no localization there, but you still have to make a new build, test it, and ship it. As a reminder, there is an ongoing strike with some QA studios that work with Activision Blizzard, as well as some internal QA folks are striking. That is, QA is the gateway to getting stuff out the door because you have to test. And we know that the patch is coming on January 25th. And adding in a hotfix means that you kind of have to start the testing process over. I'm not a software developer, but a bunch of smart software developer-y people have been in my replies, especially Wickedgood, said that, like, you have to start the testing over. You either delay that patch or you don't do this now, and it seems like those are the options that they have available to them. So I don't think the design necessarily had control over this. Even if they had all the information the second they got back in the office, I'm not sure that the resources were there to ship a patch. So, don't think this is an indicator of lack of design competence. Don't think that it was necessarily feasible to see this coming in 22.0.2, because Thief Rogue wasn't really discovered until that patch came out and wasn't really good until about a week after that, at the very end of the Christmas break. However, at the same time, even though I'm trying not to blame the design team, even though I'm trying to find nuance and understanding here, also I'm not happy playing the games that I play all the time. And I think that anyone that's disappointed that's going to take another week and a half, I think that's a pretty reasonable feeling. I think it's pretty reasonable to be disappointed. I think it's pretty reasonable to be upset that this meta was so close to greatness and then isn't going to get there, and that the best play for many, myself included, is to play the game less. I think that being disappointed there is reasonable. Not looking for people to blame, but I have feelings, and I want the game to take stress away from me, not give it to me, and right now the game can't do that for me, so understand what's going on, I suppose. Don't hold it against the design team, but not thrilled about the state of standard. And trying to navigate all those feelings at once is complicated. Very, very narrow path.
I will say, if there's anything you've been wanting to catch up on, games you haven't gotten to, perhaps that we've suggested, Hades, Inscription, those are all still out there, quite affordable. Yeah. Perhaps a good time. If you need to catch up on anime, this season is fantastic. Shingeki no Kyojin, or Attack on Titan final season, and Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, are both going right now, and they're fantastic. So, yeah, good time for catching up on other things.
Yeah, or if you're enjoying Standard, if you are a Boticus and you live in a parallel dimension to our own, have a great time playing Hearthstone. I wish I could live in your world. It's have a good time with what you're doing, and if you're not having a good time, then do something different. And it's reasonable to be disappointed, but it's 11 days in the grand scheme of things, under 2 weeks, not all that long. But also it's reasonable to be kind of annoyed that it's going to take this long for things to be different. It's all like, I don't want anyone's opinion to feel invalidated here. I just don't want to crap on the team that makes the game, because it sucks that some people aren't having fun right now, ourselves included, but it's not the only opinion, it's not the only experience, and it's not going to take that long. But also, I wish it was changed faster. Audio listeners, I'm shrugging aggressively. It's a big shrug.
It's so interesting to me, too, because Rogue is almost in... It's definitely not in the state of, like, Galakrond Shaman or Day 1 Demon Hunter, but it's interesting how long it's taking people to kind of switch over to playing these decks, whereas I'm just kind of posturizing that, like, Galakrond Shaman and Day 1 Demon Hunter, everybody just instantly jumped over to it, whereas these rogue decks, it's like slowly been a creeping of just more and more people playing it, and I'm wondering what it is that causes it. I'm just
they're
wondering
really
kind
hard
of what
to
it
play.
Is that causes it.
They're really challenging to play. A lot of the interactions aren't intuitive. And I do actually think this deck is better than Galakrond Shaman. The comparison to Doom in the Tombs, I think, is about as accurate as it gets. And I have some graphs later in the show when we get to the latter section that are kind of sobering. There are 4 decks above a 50% win rate right now per Vicious Syndicate, if you look at the legend bracket. The top 2 in Tier 1 are both rogues. There are 2 decks around slightly above 50%. They're Face Hunter and Beast Hunter, and every other deck is below 50%. This is not Day 1 Demon Hunter. Day 1 Demon Hunter was something else.
Is that going to win Chalky's poll thing? I hope it does.
If it doesn't, I'd be surprised.
I'm trying to think of another deck that's close to it. I'm sure there's a couple, but I don't know that anything really compares with it.
No,
there are
5 mana Skull.
Yeah, 5 mana Skull.
Yeah, it's 5 mana Lunacy was pretty insane, but that deck was at least a little slower. Baron's Paladin was nuts.
2/2.
Yeah, Witchwood, Call to Arms, even Paladin was really, really strong. trying to think of other decks that were just super insane outliers that didn't lose to anything.
Oh, yeah,
Kara midrange
5
shaman
mana and Tan. Oh
Yeah.
my god.
I mean,
Kara
hang on.
midrange shaman maybe.
Let's just
KFTJ
reiterate some of
Druid.
those cards.
KFTJ Druid was also insane.
5 mana in Tan, 5 mana Skull. We had Priestess was a 6 mana 6/7.
Battlefiend was no. Priestess was 7. It was 6/7. Battlefiend was a 2/2.
Yeah.
I-Beam cost 0. Aldraki Warblades had 3 charges.
3 charges.
Twin Slice was 0 mana plus 1 attack. Altruist cost 3.
3/5 weapon.
Yeah.
The 3/5 weapon that attacked a million times and then could also still go
No, it was a 3/4. It was a 5 mana 3/4. By the way, Warglius Vaznauth, the card you're talking about, not good enough for the day 1 build. Did not make the cut. Was not powerful enough because you were too busy running 5 mana Pyroblast and -2 mana, -4 mana draw 3 cards.
When you would get a 0 mana Altruist, your Twin Slices already cost 0 because they just started that way.
Oh yeah, 0 mana Twin Slice.
And
I had a Twitch clip.
You had 21 people clear their board and kill them.
I had a Twitch clip where I killed on turn 6, I think, after the Skull nerf. I killed a Libram of Hope with an Altruist without attacking. I played a Skull and then the Libram of Hope was dead. That was what happened. So there was a whole bunch of day 1 Demon Hunter was an experience that you had to be there for. It was 36 hours of complete insanity. This is still really, really imbalanced, but the rogue decks are really challenging to play optimally. Really hard to play. Counterintuitive, and they're just weirder. It's not like Baron's Lunacy Mage, where just you fire it up, you play that Lunacy on 2, and then you get to your Nagrand Slamming. You just go about your business and you Nagrand Slam some people. It's difficult, and even outside of High Diamond right now, there's a break-even point I think it is in Platinum or Gold, where Quest Warrior starts to become more popular than Thief Rogue. It's not as easy to pick up and play. I mean, it's the same reason why Garrote Rogue didn't trickle down all that far, right? Garrote Rogue was incredibly powerful in top 100. It was unbeatable in top 100. But there's a point where you get down where just the power in the deck comes from the player having more decisions, but if those decisions aren't made correctly, then the power goes away. And so Rogue is really tricky.
And notably, I've faced some weapon rogues where they clearly did not know what they were doing. Obviously, that was since I fell to at least the 2K range. And you see stuff like they play the Garrotes early for no reason, just because they had the mana. It's not how the deck
That's
works.
correct sometimes.
Sometimes, but definitely not in this case.
No, not turn 2.
And they reveal themselves early when you kind of want to keep producing the Gnoll a little longer in that deck most of the time. It's just, you can notice things sometimes when you're very familiar with the deck and you watch someone play it who clearly, they took the list because they know it's good, but they don't necessarily know what the end game strategy is. And I think you need to know what the end game strategy with that deck is. Whether you've dealt weapon damage or not, you can kill them with 8 damage Wicked Stabs and Garrotes with the +2 spell damage. So
yeah, I honestly just kind of wanted to bring up the chalky poll.
Oh yeah, Chalky has this 64 deck bracket of comparing decks relative to their power level relative to the format that they were in, comparing them to each other, and it's been fascinating to see. And I disagree with half of the votes so far, I think, if not more. But also some of them are really interesting questions, really, really interesting questions.
The type was so small. I was I just can't read this.
The polls are in the replies. You're not supposed to look at the picture.
Okay, whatever.
I don't know. It's one of those things where disagreeing is there's a difference between disagreeing with the result and disagreeing with the sentiment, I guess. Because a lot of these, I understand the thought process of most of the people voting on it, even if I maybe don't agree with the result that it brings up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There
But
are.
I think that I hope that Dame 1 Demon Hunter wins this poll overall. That's
it should,
what
I think.
It
Can't
should.
think of anything else that really. There were a couple, but so the question is relative to its power level of the other decks in the format. Day 1 Demon Hunter is probably still the correct answer, but I played the entire One Night in Karazhan format, which was a one deck format. Like, you could get there with Secret Hunter or Freeze Mage, but it was mid-range Shaman. That was what you were playing, and the second best deck was Aggro Shaman. I don't know if there was another deck that was even in the ballpark. Whereas Day 1 Demon Hunter, like, it was the first day. We didn't have Enraged Warrior yet. I don't think it would have mattered. Like, that first day was just really something, but I don't know. And, like, looking at some of these questions, Baron's Lunacy Spell Mage versus Stormwind Garrote Rogue. Which of those was really a better deck relative to its format? And that's a really complicated question, and I think I land with you on this one, that the sentiment and accessibility matters a lot here. And 2-mana Lunacy was stupid. It was dumb stupid.
Yes.
Yeah. It was
either
crazy,
way.
which is, I guess, the point of that. Yeah.
That's quite the tangent off of talking about talking about current nerfs, but
by the way,
bring it up because I didn't see it in the show notes.
But by the way, there are wild nerfs coming. They've explicitly said wild. Yep. Iksar tweeted this out. What could it mean? For the audio listeners, there is, the meme with Henry Cavill and Jason Momoa sneaking up behind him? The nice guy in the suit is Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the Hearthstone app is sneaking up behind him. What could it mean?
Please don't change the cost of Sorcerer's Apprentice. Just make it read spells cost 1 less, but not less than 1. Please just make that. Just do that. It's fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to do what you said.
I don't know that they will. There's too many cards that still just reduce stuff past it. There's still too many cards that still just do that.
But Sorcerer's Apprentice has been doing it for almost 8 years now. And the issue with Mage and Wild as well is that every single time anyone loses to a Mage and Wild, they post a replay and says, was my opponent cheating? And the answer is probably not, but sometimes yes. And removing the engine that cheating supports is not a bad thing to do. Banning cheaters also great. Big fan of that. They should do that. And the Ignite and APM Flamewaker decks aren't the most pleasant things in the world to lose to. We've had combo-heavy Mage decks that have been really, really strong for a long time, and then sometimes they're less strong when Warlock gets good, and then they're strong again, whatever. But playing my entire deck to kill you with Sorcerer's Apprentice shenanigans has been something that's been going on for a long time. I'm not an avid Wild player, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's time for that to be something different. This also does raise the question of, if your Sorcerer's Apprentice isn't the same in any format, where do you go to play with the Sorcerer's Apprentice that you remember? And that means we might be getting really close to the need for a different non-rotating format.
So, RIP future Sorcerer's Apprentice. We'll see what happens. We do have a recap or a review of the battle for Alterac Valley. Mainly, we have some statistics. So, as we kind of predicted last week, more people chose Alliance over Horde. So, about 57% of the player base chose Alliance and 43% chose Horde. Very close numbers, actually. I mean, like, when you consider the sample size, obviously that's a gigantic difference, but I'm surprised that it's like 50-40.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the overall difference, I don't know. It kind of explains how Horde was at such a disadvantage, because just the sheer number of people on Alliance because of that difference in percentage. Like, that's a 14% gap.
Yeah.
We were pretty outnumbered, is all I'm going to say.
Well, yeah,
I blame Sylvanas. I blame Sylvanas. Bad platform as Horde Warchief. Ruined it for the rest of us.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. It's anyone that plays Druid, not a Sylvanas fan. Nope.
Yep. I wonder what the statistics are, because from what I understand, and maybe it's just the PvP side, but it feels like the majority of servers are Horde favored for like classic Burning Crusade by like a pretty significant margin. So I don't know. I don't know what I was going for with that. Just I was wondering if the Horde Alliance biases in World of Warcraft translated over to Hearthstone, or if people chose Alliance more because more people thought that Vandar was going to be better than Drekthar, or if people just wanted to choose the actual faction that they identify with.
I mean, I've said this a lot. The player base of Hearthstone is massive, and I think the people tuned into social media are the people that know a lot more in terms of like Warcraft stuff potentially, or at least the characters. I think the vast majority of people who play Hearthstone just like play it as a fun thing on their phone, might know absolutely nothing about the factions, and so they were making a decision either based on whichever card looked cool, or based on, oh well, this is like the side of the humans, right? Or these are the good guys, right? Because if you look at between, the side that is clearly the orcs, or the side that has like the logos are built to look like alliances, the good guys, hordes, the bad guys. And I think that there is on average a tendency for people to like pick the good guys or the humans.
I have no idea. This is interesting. They have a lot of stats on the page. I think it's a fun read. I like that Horde players had a slightly higher win rate. Loktar. But yeah, it's I don't know. It was a fun little thing. There were a couple people that I talked to that didn't like that the WoW stuff was being grafted onto the game, where they had no interest in it. But most people that I talked to were like, I can't think of anyone that I talked to either that was like, oh man, this makes me really, really happy that I get to do more WoW stuff in my Hearthstone. I don't remember talking to anyone that was really gung-ho about it, and I talked to basically nobody that was super against it, well, like a couple people. And now that 10% of people are done with the track, a lot of those people are in the Concede Discord. A lot of the highly engaged players just finished already. Now we just go back to playing. So,
that surprises me though. 10%. I wonder what percentage of people will finish the track by the time that it is over. I wonder what their goal is for the number of players that will finish the track by the time that it's over. I would guess that you would want like 90% of people who somewhat regularly play Hearthstone to finish the track. I assume both of you are done with it?
Yeah. 90% is a big number for a game with a huge casual player base. I would guess probably closer to 50%-ish would be considered successful.
Then I wonder how easy they're going to make it to get the other card that you did not get by not finishing the track.
It's going to be tied to achievements. I imagine it won't be too difficult.
Yeah. Because I am not done with the track yet.
It's 360 total games is the approximate number of games you need to play over the course of the entire expansion to get there. So, like, I imagine that most people that routinely do daily quests will get there. I think their goal is probably if you finish your quests every day, then you should get this by the end of the expansion. And it should line up pretty well there.
That makes sense. Okay. We also have some hotfixes. The most notable of which is that the Maestra bug of you turning into a rogue has finally been fixed. I mean, this is good just because there was a fix for it, and the fix for it was to have multiple portraits for at least one extra portrait for every class, and not having to do that, I think, is good. But it also means more people are probably now going to be playing the deck, which is not something we necessarily need.
I mean, I don't mind cards working the way that they're supposed to. I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. It's the idea of the fail state keeping the deck in check is a bug that makes the cards not work. That's not, I don't know who's happy about that, really.
Fair enough. And then lastly, for the news, we have the Iksar AMA, as we now do again basically every week. Some of the main topics that were discussed is that Dean said there are big changes coming to core set, but he doesn't expect it to drastically alter the way the game is played, which I think is kind of what we're all hoping for. We want new cards, but we don't want the cards to make the classes feel like super different. So I'm happy to hear that answer.
Yep.
The core set cards that leave the set in New Hearthstone year will leave your collection unless you already own them in a collectible form. We already kind of knew that this was how it was going to function.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of ambiguity on if they were made for the core set and didn't exist before, do you get them or do you have to craft them? It looks like the answer is craft. But also, I tweeted about this and was reminded that there are wild packs that only give cards that are in wild, and if you open a couple of those, you'll probably get your Illidari Inquisitors and whatever back.
All right. And then there's been a bit of a lack of change to arena balance since Tianding has left, and so they're trying to figure out how they are going to be approaching it. Tianding did basically all of the micro adjustments that we would hear about, kind of balancing arena, and now that he has left, they have not been doing that. So arena players, it sounds like they're at least looking into how to figure out how to make changes in the future, if you're hoping for some arena changes.
Yeah, they talked about a couple different ways that they might approach arena balance going forward. Either find a new person to do this or find a different way to do this, but it's, interesting that so much of what made the mode work was so reliant on a single person.
And then I'm sure Hat's ears perked up when this next topic came up, because Dean was thinking about a limited podcast called Making Hearthstone, which would have someone interview different Hearthstone developers, and he might pitch the podcast idea. He would need the right team or right people on the team be willing to take part, and he was considering one of the hosts to be someone who we know to do quite a few podcasts.
That's me. I'm the host. Yeah, he did this first. He said this first. I didn't prompt this. He came up with this all on his own. Where he said, "Hey, I was making a pun about laundry detergent, because there was where is this tweet? Because this is the most important part of the story." Where he was responding to a Jesse Alexander tweet by talking about how he thinks Gain is better than Tide. And I said that I was jokingly working on a podcast about Hearthstone, or about household brands. Did he want to come in my Tide podcast? And his response to that was actually say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I was thinking about having you do an actual podcast interviewing the people that made Hearthstone and their contributions and memories." And then suddenly said that he would consider pitching it, except, he'd have to pay me and get the right folks on board, and some of them may be interested, and some of them might have a harder time that have moved on from Blizzard. Gave some names out there. They all work at different companies now. Apparently, Alec Dawson made a limited run episode with Liv Breeden behind the scenes of the process of initial design, of designing a set, and apparently one episode was recorded. And Deck Tech stepped in and said that there were some there were some obstacles that they ran into the last time they tried to get this out there, and he wanted to work through them with Dean. So, I mildly freaked out in the replies and said, I totally get it, this can't happen, but also, yes, I will do this. So we'll see. No one from Blizzard's reached out to me yet.
If you need someone to take over editing, like, VS so that you can do that, I think, like, we want this to happen. So anything that can be done to make it happen.
I feel like Hat went out and bought a construction hat just so that he could operate a bulldozer to get rid of the obstacles preventing him from being able to do this podcast.
I have to get my CDL certification too. Yes. I don't think this will happen, but I am honored to be mentioned unsolicitedly, independently. And also if it did happen, I would be over the moon. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Can't get enough Hat podcasts, I'll tell you that much. And then 2 last little notes here. Apparently there was a decision to keep around Demon Hunter because there was a thought that potentially Demon Hunter would rotate out after it had been around for a year. It seems like the plans currently are to keep it as a mainstay class in Hearthstone, but I wonder if there's ever a point in the future where they decide that maybe it's time to rotate Demon Hunter out.
I feel like that's something that either needed to be stated up front or like, I don't think you could do that at this point. I think people would be pretty upset. There's a lot of folks that are in love with the class. There are some people that definitely hate the class, but I think it's been too long at this point to sort of phase out. But this surprised me considerably. And to hear as well that he said it was like a lot of the top people or like on the team sort of thought that was the best approach. And I had no idea.
Yeah, I am really glad they did not do this. As a Demon Hunter fan, I like the second year a lot more than I like the first year, because I think they did a really great job of figuring out what is Demon Hunter, and they made it feel Demon Hunter-y without being the same cards, and it's, I don't know, I like it a lot where it is now, and I'm glad they didn't decide to do this. I can see how there was a way they would think this is a good idea, and it's interesting to note that the conversations around Demon Hunter were probably happening around the same time they decided to Hall of Fame Gen and Baku, and I wouldn't be surprised if that mindset was permeating this discussion of, we just came away from a powerful hero power-based class, do you really want to make another one permanently? So, yeah. I'm glad they kept it.
I would have been fine if they axed it. I don't care. But I also think that there would have been a considerable amount of drama about removing it, because I think a lot of people would have felt like it was taking away something from them, and we all know how people get when they feel like they're having something taken away from them. So overall, I'm fine that they're keeping Demon Hunter, and honestly, current Demon Hunter feels pretty good. So having all of that time to kind of iterate on it, I think, is beneficial. And then lastly, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I actually had a really good run with an aggro Demon Hunter running Glide and the hero, and it was doing amazing against everything that was not Thief Rogue. And at the time, Thief Rogue was the dominant one. And so to look at all my matches, it was like win, 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 win. Every single Thief Rogue was a loss.
Yeah. And then lastly for the AMA is that Dean's goals for this year are to improve existing features rather than add more layers on top of what they have. Thank goodness. I hope that this is basically everybody's thought process, because this is what I think is needed most in the client, as I believe we answered last week in the mailbag. I think this was kind of universally one of our answers to one of the questions, is we just want to see everything get smoothed out a bit.
I feel pretty confident this is a consistent internal desire too. Yeah. Well, I guess that's the news. Yeah. Shall we do the brisk tournament and ladder section? Let's go. It's gonna be, you know what we're gonna say, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Let's go.
It's the grand tournament!
All right, so I have some graphs up on the screen for qualifiers this week. For those of you that are unaware, for your audio listeners, well, the top win rate deck in qualifiers this current week is Thief Rogue. The second best deck is Thief Weapon Rogue, and the third best deck is Weapon Rogue. The fourth is Quest Druid, and the fifth is Glide DH. Most banned deck, by the way, is Thief Rogue. It is both the most banned and the highest win rate. There's a lot going on. Hasn't won any qualifiers, actually. Gnoll Poison won qualifiers, couple Shamans, Muzaki, whatever. But if we look at last week's results, the winners week 1 were pretty diverse. 9 out of 10 classes got a win. The only one that did not was Warrior. No Warrior wins all week. 2 Shadow Priests. So Priest still has it. Still got it going. But Rogue was in almost every winning lineup. There were a couple different. Some Ozaki mages, some Shamans, some Handlock, some Face Hunter. A whole bunch of Druids. A little bit of Paladin, a little Fel DH. So far this week has just gotten started. We still have some decent variety. My experience has typically been you either get a good Conquest meta or a good ladder meta. You don't get both, because when a ban is good, because you can focus your strategy a little bit more, it usually makes Conquest more interesting. And as far as when ladder is diverse, it's really hard to build a Conquest lineup that effectively targets, and so you end up bringing more good deck lineups, and you're more matchup dependent. So I imagine this Conquest meta, from what I've seen so far, it's a lot more skill rewarding, and you also get to ban Rogue. So both those are great. Big fan. But so far, Rogue is all 3 of the 3 best decks, and it is the most banned, still very strong. So be aware of that. When it comes to ladder, I alluded to this earlier, but looking at the top 1K bracket on Vicious Syndicate, if you head over there on the latest report, the top 2 decks are Rogue and Rogue. They're the only tier 1 decks on this list. Poison Rogue actually better than Thief Rogue, both in the 54% win rate category. Face Hunter around 51, Beast Druid barely over the 50% line. Everything else below 50% win rate, tier 3 or lower. Handlock, Libram Paladin, Taunt Druid, Quest Shaman, Bolner Shaman, the top of that category. There's a bunch of variety in tier 3, tier 4. The further down you go, the more variety in classes that you see. If you look, once you filter to Legend only, then Libram Paladin and Hand Warlock sneak above the line. When you go to the Diamond meta, then you also get Quest Warrior, Quest Rogue, Quest Shaman, and Big Beast Hunter also get added to that list. But the higher up you go, the more bleak it looks. Unfortunately, Zach has a theory that when he does the report next week, there are likely only going to be 2 decks above a 50% win rate, Rogue and Rogue. That is his current projection. So we'll see if that ends up happening. Doom in the Tombs-esque, but, the representation is really significant here, and the win rates overall are pretty crazy. So looking at the matchups real quick here, just to make sure, at Diamond 4 to Legend, Poison Rogue, the biggest counter, of course, is Face Hunter. Quest Warrior, actually a pretty decent counter. If you're looking to beat Thief Rogue instead, Hand Warlock is the best counter, and Libram Paladin's okay. But there's no deck that beats both. Not a single one. Zach has tweeted a list of Ping Mage that he believes is actually okay against both. He runs 2 Vipers. I am skeptical, but he had good results with it so far. There might be some ways to react. Also, you never beat a Druid or a Warrior, but you just live with that. So, that is the nature of Constructed right now. And I imagine that this will be how it goes for the next 10 days, unless there is a really, really major shakeup in meta development that we didn't see coming. So, since we just talked about Rogue in this section, let's talk about Rogue again in the next section for Decksplanations, so you can at least understand. If you want to play Poison Rogue and enjoy it while you can, we'll tell you how to do that. And if you want to beat it, we'll tell you how to try. Let's go.
So this is in the show notes, and I cannot express this enough. All right. So what happened to make Poison Rogue the best deck, supplanting even Thief Rogue, which is still very good? We described this earlier. Meaty posted on Twitter a deck that Orange played in qualifiers, just adding Maestra plus Gnolls into the other weapon rogue. You took out the self-sharpening sword and a couple other things I don't really know, but I mean it was just
there was no triple S. Took out one prep and both Sinister Strikes.
Okay, there you go. And yeah, just having Maestra plus double Gnoll means that sometimes you can still beat Hunters, which is a bad matchup, but you can still beat them because you passage on one and hit a Wild Paw Gnoll, or just like keep a Wild Paw Gnoll and cycle the first 2 turns and play it on 2 or 3. Like the early impact of Gnoll is so powerful, whether you're on defense or offense. Because if you play a Gnoll on turn 2, you can get a couple of hits in most of the time, and that early damage means less having to get hits in with your weapon, or actually end up having to do the full combo in the late game. The deck seems to be a weapon deck, but although it's called Poison Rogue, this is secretly Garrote Rogue 2.0. The addition of Scabs means that you have 12 mana if you're waiting until turn 10, and often you don't have to, but using that prep anything hero power, the extra 2 mana, you can play your Guild Trader for 2 and shovel out a ton of burn just with Garrote, drawing a card, and the Wicked Stabs. If you have waited till turn 10, each Wicked Stab is 8 damage, so that's just 16 points of damage from those alone. If your opponent hasn't taken any damage, sometimes the ceiling is higher because you can use an SI7 Extortion to hit them for another 5, or if they've got a bunch of armor, maybe 10 for using both of them. Of course, the Blackwater Cutlass can further increase the mana reduction from trading that and sort of banking those discounts to use in the late game with your Garrotes or Wicked Stabs. So the damage potential of this deck tends to be in sort of the 40s to 50s without the weapon. And so that's part of why it's so challenging, is you really need to gain significant armor to be able to escape the combo. And on top of that, you have to concern yourself with the weapon hitting your face, and now also early Wild Paw Gnolls. Of course, in terms of defensive tools, we basically have Ice Block. You go Cloak of Shadows on 5 and 6 if you can find it, and then Scabs on 7. You've got that sort of 2 mana boost of the hero power, and now you're all set to kill your opponent from 30. So that's why, as well, it doesn't just straight up lose to Taunts and Vipers, because Viper can definitely help. Usually the way it helps is they've used a Silverleaf poison on their weapon or some other poisons, and so getting rid of that significantly slows down their ability to draw cards, because it is important for them to get through their entire deck to be able to make sure they hit you with all these spell damage boosted Garrotes or bleeds. And if you can blow up the weapon once it's got a Silverleaf poison on it, it means they aren't drawing that card every turn from attacking, and they won't have as discounted of a cutting class. So there have definitely been times where I've waited a turn after my opponent played Swine Tusk Shank for them to juice it up a bit, and then I play the Viper, particularly if they've gone super all in. I've had opponents just concede because at that point their draw engine is not fast enough to get them to the point of comboing you. But there are other times where they kind of take it at more of a leisurely pace. They don't go all in, and if they know that you're not really going to be able to kill them anytime soon, that's just plenty of time to still go in with Secret Passage to clear out a whole bunch of cards. The number of tradables with SI7 Extortion and Blackwater Cutlass Sometimes they even have their own Viper in addition to the Guild Trader. So having 5 or 6 tradables means when they secret passage into a tradable and then they trade those, they get to keep the cards that they traded into. So it's sort of even better able to take advantage of secret passage than rogues already are. It's yeah, it's super worth running Gnolls just because of the situations I described, where certain matchups that would have been tough, aggressive matchups, Gnoll just wins you the early game if you could pull it off a lot of the time, or at least buys you the necessary time to get your weapon online with Paralytic Poison. I think when Paralytic Poison came out, and I was like, I'm really worried about this because no, it doesn't gain life, but it kind of gains life by preventing damage. And we have been seeing that in full effect now, where being able to clear minions with the Swine Tusk Shank by just not taking damage when you have to hit them with your weapon is quite significant. It is a very roguey way of gaining life, but I know for sure if they couldn't clear minions without taking damage, there's some games that could have been won.
Yeah. And there's really, well, the big reason why this deck is good now, Shadowcrafter Scabs. You want to talk about removing minions without taking damage? How about unconditionally removing all the minions without taking damage? And really, the lethality is increased so much by Hero Power and Guild Trader. That is the thing that was also missing before, besides the 5 armor, besides the unconditional board reset, besides the free 4/2 stealths, besides the 3 turns in a row instead of 2, because Cloak Scabs prevent you from being attacked. This deck is Poison Rogue, the Weapon Rogue, whatever you want to call it. The Shank is, like, almost Plan B. The Shank is more like Field Contact than anything else. It's your engine for drawing, but it's not how you win the game. You win the game with Guild Trader, Stab, Garrote, draw. That is how you win the game. And you can do that last draw with the Cutlass trade, comes up quite a bit. There are a lot of ways to do it, but it's the... Bodic, as you described this earlier, that I said Beast Druid's resilient to Scabs. You're resilient to Scabs into minions, you're not resilient to Scabs into 30 damage. And the 30 damage is often where it comes down. Even if you can taunt up against the 4/2s, I feel like I get to attack with those 4/2s as Poison Rogue like 20% of the time. But just the amount of damage that you can deal from hand without ever having to hit face is crazy. Which means you also don't need to go all in on a Shank to win, and Viper doesn't stop you. Because Dagger, Silverleaf Poison Swing is fine, because all you need to do is draw and enable Cutting Class and get through your deck.
Yeah, and for that reason, in terms of actual counters, well, it's tough. Face Hunter and Aggro, not Beast Druid, Aggro Druid, the one that wants to win by turn 5, are pretty strong against it. Stuff like Trog. It's not a given that you'll be able to run away with Trog, because they do have a lot of ways of dealing with it. SI7 Extortion, Blackwater Cutlass, Swine Tusk Shank, all of those are ways, and Wicked Stab, all of those are ways to get rid of a naked, unbuffed Trog without casting spells. But also I've seen a rogue just kind of do what they could without really casting spells for a few turns, just trading, trying to make their hand a bit better. And then eventually they fill your board with the Trogs and just say, okay, I'm doing all my things at once. Now you can't play anything. And I'm going to go stealth Scabs. And sometimes they can still win, even though they gave you a full board of Trogs. So, and then the addition of the Gnolls means that there are times as the Face Hunter where you're facing down a Wild Paw Gnoll on turn 2, and like, what do you do? I mean, at that point, you've been put so far behind that it's hard to get that necessary early game damage in to really be able to close out the game. Now, it's still favored for the Hunter. I think it's like a 30%er for the Rogue. Maybe that's gone up a bit with the addition of Gnolls, but you don't get there every time. Druids can out-armor them, but again, there's sort of the requirement of, hey, if your plan is to out-armor the Garrotes, you need to have Vipers because it's not really possible to out-armor a, fully juiced Swine Tusk Shank. That thing can get in for 40 damage on its own if it is just sort of allowed to stick around.
Yeah. Well, and also, against the Overgrowth deck, just play a Gnoll on 2. Hit him for 12. Like, it's just, Gnoll just attacks. It's just a minion that attacks. It's too big, too fast. And that adds an element to the deck. So far, looking at the HSR stats, Face Hunter, this list in the last, in Legend, since the patch, is 35-65 for the Hunter. So definitely, like, Hunter favored. Close enough to say, I'm not going to call it a counter, but I'm going to call it like a matchup that the Hunter definitely wants and the Poison Rogue definitely doesn't. And that's the worst matchup. By a fairly large margin. At 35%, it's got one matchup. Oh, Control Warrior also not great. Though I will say, I personally had the experience of I played against a Control Warrior where I got Vendor Viper on 4, Bulwarked on 7, and I killed him on 9. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of dumb. Just kind of more than it's supposed to do, but we know that. But we're not here to tell you that the deck is dumb and needs to be nerfed because you know that already. It's just a question of what do we do? If we want to play this, how do we play this? And if we want to play against it, what do we do? So Face Hunter and Aggro Taunty Razormane Battleguard Druid are pretty strong against it. Beast Druid is a little bit too slow. It can get there, but Poison Rogue is favored. But it's just really hard to figure out a deck that beats one of the rogue decks and not the other. And that's why the latter feels so monotonous right now, is that there are two rogues that both do different things, and they're both really good at those different things, and they both play Nolan's Gabs.
Yeah, I encountered a Hunter that was playing 2 beasts in their deck. Those beasts were Rat King and Rustrot Viper, and they had 2 of the 2-mana 1/3 that get a copy, like discover a copy of a beast in your deck, so that they could consistently hit Viper, and they were running 2 gangsters with ramming mounts in the deck, and I was just like, wow, this Hunter is committed. Like, to try and get rid of everything the weapon or poison rogues throw at you, you just have to dedicate so many slots. The idea with Gangster, of course, being that once they've played Scabs, which they generally do to get the mana discount before they garrote you, if you play a Gangster, then you can kill their Guild Trader. So if they want to try and play Guild Trader, it'll get attacked and immediately die. It's sort of like a face-up secret. And if you've got Ramming Mount, then it will sort of keep attacking, any minions they would play. So they would have to send a Wicked Stab into it after it attacks if they're playing Rustrot Viper, or if they save Maestra and they play Maestra to unstealth your Gangster, then they would have to at least throw some burn at it to remove it from the board. So yeah, this Hunter was running double Gangster, double Viper, with ways of like getting copies of Viper. And I don't know, maybe they're beating Weapon Rogues, maybe not, but I sure don't know how they're beating other decks. And that's kind of the compromise that is being made. Part of why I like going Warrior is I can commit some slots to beating the Weapon Rogue, and I'll beat it a lot of the time, but I also will beat those Face Hunters most of the time.
Yeah. It's a challenge right now, figuring out, do I beat one of these, do I try and beat both and lose to everything else, or do I do something else? I don't know. It's hard to do. So, we talked about mulligans a bit already, right? Talked about if you're playing Poison Rogue, what you're looking for.
I'm not sure we said it because it feels a little self-explanatory, but yeah, I mean, you're looking for the weapon, Swine Tusk Shank. Gnoll, because I mean, it's the broken card, it's the Corridor Creeper, the Mogu Flesh Aper, whatever you want to call it. And Cutlass is basically free tradable because it gives you a discount. It's really good to get a 0-mana Secret Passage, or, I mean, discounting anything is good, but like a Wicked Stab, so that when you're going to go off, or your garrotes, just like making them cheaper for when you do pop off, those discounts add up. It's the only tradable that really kind of doesn't cost mana.
Yeah. Cutlass is insane. Crazy card. There have been some games where, like, I just need to cloak and wait, and so the deck is down to like 3 cards, and I'm just trading cutlasses back and forth, and I end up with a hand of like 0 mana stab, 0 mana garrote, 0 mana garrote, and then you can just tradable all day next turn and just kill them. It's very, very strong. So I want to share a brief note about Secret Passage here. There is the temptation to passage on 1. Because when you passage on 1, your Gnolls cost 0. But Secret Passage also is a good card when you play it for Secret Passage to draw the other cards. The reason you play it on 1 is if you either have a Gnoll on hand, you have a Gnoll in hand already, and you know you're going to need it, or you need to go look for a Gnoll if you're against Face Hunter. Pretty much just Face Hunter. Because it has to be an aggressive deck that you can't freeze out with Cloak, and you have to need the Gnolls to win. Maybe against Razormane Battleguard Druid, if they have like a turn 1 Peasant, that's usually a good tell. If they have turn 1 Trog, don't do this, obviously. But it has to be a matchup where you either have access to a Gnolls and you need them right away, or you really need a Gnoll right away to not die. And Face Hunter is the main one there. Otherwise, don't even keep Passage. Just put it back, because you'll draw it later and it's fine. If you have a crazy good hand, if your hand is Cutlass, Gnoll, Shank, and Passage, you could consider keeping the Passage, because you're guaranteed to hit the Passage there, and you can figure it out. But even then, it's usually not the right card to keep, because then I would want to look for Deadly Poisons or whatever, or even Extortion. And keep in mind as well, you don't have other ways to discount Gnoll once you take the mask off, outside of bugs, which I'm not going to explain how they work here in this podcast, because I don't want people to win because of bugs. So you usually want to wait to take the mask off until turn 2 with a tradable at the absolute earliest, maybe turn 3. You can wait a minute. You're not in a rush. As long as you're not going to die to minion pressure, you don't have to really get going until about turn 3. So it's Shank, Gnoll, and Cutlass. If you have a Gnoll, you can keep an Extortion if you think that might be a minion deck, because Extortion can also be used at turn 1 play, and then just tradable on 1. Almost always you're tradabling on 1. You're running Viper, you do that too. I don't like running Viper because it makes your swindles a lot worse. Because you only have 4 minions in the deck otherwise, and you have 5 with the Viper, and drawing a neutral sucks for Gnoll. So I don't run it. But there's an argument to do so. If you end up breaking the mask on 1, your Dagger pass on 2 is usually the way to go if you don't have a Shank. If you do have a Shank, you attack with it. And then you Silverleaf poison that weapon if you don't have a Shank, and you just go in on the Dagger. Make their Rustrot Vipers worse, make them think about, do I Rustrot Viper this hero power dagger, or do I save it and let them draw a couple cards? You can deadly poison it to activate your cutting classes. You aren't reliant on Shank. You really aren't. You're reliant on draw, which means Silverleaf and cutting class, but as long as you enable those, you're usually okay. So don't be afraid to throw out the poisons there right away. Don't be afraid to, if you have a 2-mana Gnoll on turn 2, just play it. Play your 4-5 Rush on 2. It's a good card. Just throw it out there. Attack him in the face. It's good. And also, especially right now, especially if you're at a higher rank, the turn you play Shank, attack with it. Because either you're going to have more poisons and it's going to be equipped for the entire game, or they're going to Viper you and then you dealt 2. Those are your options. Attack with the Shank. Just hit them. Very rare that you're not going to do that.
I imagine keeping low durability on your weapons is a big part of playing when you're expecting a lot of people to have Vipers. So not over poisoning your weapons if just keeping at 1 to 2 durability on your weapon will make people rethink when they Viper you. It'll keep, cards in hand, and understanding that drawing cards is more important than dealing damage with your weapon in the majority of cases. Yeah. I would guess.
I would also say, if you aren't certain that you'll be able to get both Cloak of Shadows like within a couple turns, and you're like, well, I might die this turn, but they have to have the burst. There are times where I would say, look, just don't Cloak on that first one. Make sure you get the Cloak on 6 so that you can, follow up with Scabs or something. But a lot of times, if it's sort of like, well, I know I have 1 Cloak, but I'm not sure if I'll have the second, it can be worth the risk for the win to just not Cloak while you're on 17 HP and they aren't presenting lethal, just so that you can make sure that you'll be safe the following turn. Because you really only want to be cloaking on turns that you think you're going to die. I guess situationally you can go, okay, I'm going to cloak this turn because it'll stop a lot of damage. But I think generally you're cloaking to like strictly not die so that you can get to scabs and then following the scabs turn, try and kill them.
Yeah. Mirrors get weird there.
Yeah, or sometimes you're cloaking to get the card out of your hand because you're drawing enough cards that you need the card out of hand, and it's not a matchup where you're worried about dying. It's a matchup where you're worried about killing them before you have the chance to die, too.
Yep. And mirrors get really weird. There are times where I'll rarely cloak on 4, but I'll often cloak on 5 in the mirror if my board is empty, just so they can't get a draw off their Silverleaf. It comes up a surprising amount where you can usually take 1 turn in the mid game there, though if neither player cloaks, it is very silly. The mirror, without either playing draw and cloak, it is actually just play every damage card in your hand and go all face all the time, and see which number is higher. Though it can be correct for the player with Paralytic Poison to end up trading with Gnolls or whatever, just to make sure that they don't deal you bonus damage, because leading up Gnolls, that's a free Wicked Stab every turn. You don't really want to do that. But the 5 health breakpoint is not convenient to hit at all, unless you happen to have a Shank with Deadly Paralytic, in which case you should probably kill the Gnoll. There's usually so much excess damage that you can afford to trade into minions in a lot of the minion matchups and a lot of the lower curve matchups, because you're just going to kill from hand anyways. But in the Poison Rogue Mirrors, sometimes you just kill them on 6, and then they can't gain the 5 from scabs. And the conventional wisdom might be that it's better to be the person that scabs second, but the reason you play scabs is the hero power. That is the best part of scabs. There are a lot of really good parts of scabs. The entire card is nuts. But especially in the mirror, the hero power is the best thing that the card does. Maybe the 5 armor is number 2. Kind of insane if you think about it. But like just gain 5 armor and overgrowth is enough. That's usually what you're looking for. And you get to kill really, really fast in the mirror because you usually don't have to worry about minions other than other Gnolls. So just keep that in mind, that often it can be correct to use Cloak to deny draw in the mirror match. Yeah, I don't know. There's some nuance to the deck, and I definitely recommend watching people like Meaty play it. He's been streaming a lot, very, very good player. And, plays the deck to slow the game down until you speed it up, is usually how it goes. There's going to be more than we can really explain here in the show, but just in terms of broad strokes, that's what you're looking at. The number one piece of advice I've been giving people is not to over-rely on Shank, and do not be afraid of casting poisons on a dagger or a cutlass. Very important.
Yeah. The name of the game is getting your deck to a small enough portion where you kill them with damage, because people often try to fight this deck by putting taunts in your way, and you will not be able to attack them because you do not have that many ways to get through, and your burn should not be going towards minions. Generally, your burn should not be going towards minions if you're using an excessive amount of burn just to get extra weapon attacks on their face. Burn should be used with Guild Trader to go face, because oftentimes you can kill opponents without attacking them. Attacking their face, that is. Generally, you attack their minions if they're taunting in the way.
And
or dealing damage to you.
Probably the number one thing to remember, and perhaps broadly the most misunderstood part of the deck. If someone is just looking at it for the first time, they're like, oh, it's a weapon deck. I want to be, I have to get Shank, have to hit them in the face. It's like, yeah, that definitely helps, but it's a vehicle for card draw, and if you use your poisons on the dagger, that's okay. You just need to empty your deck, scabs, and then garrote them to death.
And that's enough about that deck, honestly.
I kind of don't want to talk about this deck anymore, yeah.
That's more than enough.
I've been playing some of it. I admit it. I've been playing it. It's powerful. I don't enjoy the wins. I don't even like winning with it, so I have reevaluated what I want to do, except sometimes when I queue up a couple games because I feel like I want to play Hearthstone, and then I lose, and then I play Poison Rogue and get the ranks back, and then I go take a shower before bed. What are you going to do? You can't, you know, that's just how it is right now, and it's very important to play the game on its terms if you want to play it. But for right now, I'm going to explore something else. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We hope this was helpful. If you are playing Poison Rogue and you are enjoying it, this is not a message of judgment. Feel free to play it, enjoy it, win with it, whatever you want to do. Like, there's no judgment here. There's no deck shaming. But I think we're all looking forward to this deck not being in the game anymore. And if you do like it, and you don't like hearing that, I'm sorry, but I'm not that sorry. Enjoy your time with it while you can. All right. I think we're going to wind down here. So, we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com. You can find our contact info, show notes, patron information. You can monetarily support our show, patreon.com/CoinConcede. Just every week live at twitch.coinconcede.com. Community chats in our Discord, discord.coinconcede.com. Reddit or email, coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, CoinConcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CoinConcede. Like some CC swag, heading over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Doge, K, Proby 1, Crush, Cap, Squatch, David P, Snowpack, Lucky, Faded Black, Wild Lou, Itinerant Wizard, and Jeremy T. Coin Concedes, throwing it out there. Proby 1 for the 5 subs, Mr. Kerfluffle for the sub, Crush for the sub, Wicked Good for the huge raid. Thank you so much, Wicked Good. I don't know. Is there anyone else I forgot? Mr. Bungalow, thank you so much for the sub. Yeah. And also, want to give a special Coin Concede to Puffin, Blizzard developer who announced that today, after 15 years at Blizzard, it is his last day on the team. So he is moving on from the Hearthstone team. Puffin, thank you so much for everything. You know, hope you have. We're gonna miss you, but the next thing that you make is probably gonna be awesome. It's definitely gonna be awesome. So thank you so much. Edelweiss, Coin Concedes.
So first to you, Hat, because I recently released my first non-Hearthstone podcast, and I'm only able to do that because you taught me how to use Audition and do the audio editing, and it would not have been nearly as good of a product if I could not edit the show. So, yeah, really excited about that. It's called Jungian Ever After. It has nothing to do with Hearthstone. It's about fairy tales and kind of a Jungian analysis of fairy tales because my mother-in-law is a Jungian analyst. So if that sounds good to you, go ahead and look it up. Coin Concede to Raren because he's been putting out these sweet Hearthstone documentaries that I've been really enjoying. Particularly if you know some of these old school personalities from Hearthstone's history, I think it's interesting to kind of get info about like what they've been up to and what sort of went down, why they maybe have left the game, etc. It's been a pleasure to watch all of those. And then also Pigpen and Rec, who have been in the Edelweiss Deck Lab in our Discord, coming up with sort of ideas and approaches to maybe getting some games off of Weapon Rogue. Particular, I've started with a base of Rex Control Warrior with Double Gangster and Vipers to try and beat the rogues. I added Kel'Thuzad because Kel'Thuzad Shield Shatter is one of my great pleasures right now. Probably my favorite thing to do against the Beast Druids is to go Kel'Thuzad Shield Shatter. It's just great. You deal just enough damage to clear the board, but leave Kel'Thuzad alive and like make a board of your own. It's deeply satisfying. So, yeah, Coin Concede to all those folks.
Botticus?
I'm going to Coin Concede to people who are trying to make gaming a more positive space, like Akali on Twitter, and also there was an account that I lost about somebody who was kind of getting bullied. They had a very unfortunate sequence of DMs through the Hearthstone client, and they were just trying to make the Hearthstone a better place. So hopefully people learn from that and try to become more positive people, and just try to enjoy your gaming experience and not take it out on others.
Yeah, I was very saddened by that exchange, seeing it. This person was playing Rogue because it's a good deck, and people should not get judgment or be
playing a deck that wins.
Right, for playing a good deck. It's like, that's usually what you want to do.
Doesn't matter where you are on ladder. It literally does not matter at what point you're at. Just play what you're going to enjoy playing. If that means you're playing a deck that wins and you enjoy that because it wins, then do that. So, and then just be kind to people is all I will say.
Yeah. And on the other end, perhaps if you're playing Rogue right now, might be a good time to not accept friend requests after games.
I mean, it's always a good idea to not accept friend requests, unfortunately. Doesn't matter what you're playing, because the feature from what I've seen is usually used for sending salty messages. Usually. The messages in this particular tweet, which I don't want to, they're pretty over the line, really far over the line. It was some beyond bullying. But yeah, it's... I also appreciate the people that are trying to draw attention to the problems that come with interaction in Hearthstone and trying to make the better place. Alkali Lake, in particular, amazing. She's great. We know that. I would like to concede also to an account that's trying to bring more positivity to Hearthstone, Guff Rune Totem. I love you, Guff. You're the best. Of course, Raren for putting on another Hearthstone Jeopardy equivalent. I did not win. I lost by 1 point to Jombre. Jombre, new obscure jank cards. Could you believe it? Who would have guessed? So I lost the final one because I switched the order of the words in one of the hero cards out of naming all 10. But it was a very tightly fought match. The video will be going up on his YouTube, I think, within next week. Check it out. And PC Gamer, I have another article going up over there, probably beginning of next week, about the state of Hearthstone currently. So, really appreciate them giving me a chance to put it out there, put my writing out there. So thank you so much, PC Gamer. And that's going to do it for this week's show, so keep calm and find your fun. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
I said a collie again, didn't I?
You did.
You did.
Yeah.
The League of Legends character.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to stop recording now. All right.
I got asked to play League of Legends by some friends and politely declined, as I've seen more bad than good come from playing that game.
Yeah.
It's one of those games, it's like, this is a really good game. However, the saltiness that is associated with it seems fairly universal for a lot of people, so I think I'm going to just avoid it.
I think that's a good idea.
I have not played any TFT at all, actually.
Yeah, I find TFT fairly overwhelming. In terms of League, I think if I had my old team that I played with in college, if they were all like, hey, we're playing again, do you want to play with us? I would 100% be there. Like, I would play with them. But I think our sessions would not run as late into the night as they used to.
No.
And it would be 100% just to hang out with the crew again, not because I want to try hard at the game.
Yeah, I'm on the part where it's like, I would like to play with them. I think I would enjoy it for a few games, and then if we ended up playing it consistently, it would deteriorate very quickly over time, and I would end up being less enthused about it. Yeah, Team of 5 is definitely the way to go, but even then, muting all chat is probably the next step you need to take, and also trying not to get too competitive about it, because that game has been out for a very long time and people are very good at it, and expecting to be good at it
The barrier to entry is
considering-
unbelievable in terms of hours expended. Like, it's just really, really crazy how much you have to play to even know how bad you are. It takes like 1,000 hours. Like, it's just the amount of skill in that game. You have to spend 1,000 hours to figure out where the skills are that you need to develop, and then keep going.
And then spend time getting the timing down on your main characters for last hitting creeps to make sure you get maximum gold. Like, no thank you.
Blizzard makes games that are accessible and you can get into them and have fun right away and then get better over time. Riot, no. Riot says, if you're playing this game, this is the game you're going to play. If you want to be good at it, you will have to learn it. We are not going to dumb it down or make it easy for you to figure it out. You got to do that on your own. And plenty of other people have already done that, and they're going to be better than you, and you're going to know they're better than you because they're going to tell you. That is the Riot philosophy. So the games have a ton of depth. Runeterra is like in the middle there, but it still has so many keywords and mechanics and whatever, and the system that rewards you cards in Runeterra is built on you play a lot of time. You put a lot of time in, and then you get free cards. Again, it's still the same thing. Not about accessibility, it's about time investment. So that's how Riot makes their games.
I'm always excited for like League or I guess Runeterra is the name of their world, right? I'm excited for content in there. All of their videos are gorgeous. So because I sort of knew some of the lore stuff before, I always find those really exciting. Arcane was very exciting for me to watch. Spectacular show. But I'm just not really playing the game anymore. I'm a little excited for the fighting game. I don't know that I'll have a ton of people to play it with, but it'll be cool to see a Riot fighting game. And I'm told the RPG is good. I'm sort of waiting to see if Ruined King will go on discount sometime. Pick that up.
I heard it. Ruined King is very good.
mean, it's kind of crazy because I think Riot makes incredibly good games that are just incredibly difficult to get into. But once you're into them, you're stuck for a while, as long as you were able to get past the barrier to entry, which is very high. But it doesn't seem like they're super intent on reducing that barrier to entry.
I think it is a defining feature of the game now.
I mean, like to some extent, auto chess was the perfect sort of genre for them to make a game for, because it just always was that way. So when they made TFT and people who liked auto chess flocked to it, was like, yeah. It's just, there's not really a tutorial. You go in. I hope you know how it works.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Hearthstone makes Battlegrounds. They take out like 2/3 of the mechanics in auto chess. It's still incredibly complicated, but you can play it and make a tutorial that actually explains the mechanics of the game. And now it's the most popular mode in Hearthstone. Okay. Anyways, stream, we're going to bring the stream down. Thank you so much for being here.
Probably should raid someone with all these folks.
Oh, I guess we should. Find someone to raid. We're going to raid.
Sway? Pizza?
I'm down to raid Sway.
Cantaloupe?
We were just talking about BGs. What is there's an underscore, right?
Yes. Yes, there is.
Yeah, Sway underscore Bay.
All right, we're going to go say hi.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. Go tell Sway we said hi.